Okay. So we are all excited about this particular panel, as with all. We thank Dimensions XR 2020 SSVAR for the opportunity to really help connect the dots between what our previous panels and the culmination of this today. So this one is called the new role of XR. And the meaning behind that is that as the world is grappling with so much going on from the COVID-19 global pandemic and the various recent and ongoing headlines that are just causing us to really take a pause and look at what individually our new role is and collectively what our new role is in the intersection of XR. And so what we've talked about in the previous days and the culmination of our panel today is that there is going to be, and we're experiencing this already, impact and dire consequences to as this intersection of our lives and XR emerges, that there will be direct connection. The data that we see that is being used and tracked by big tech and even through individuals through just their normal use of technology causes us to really need to take a moment and look at what this all means. When we see the headlines of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or other global instances that have happened, how does that impact the data that is being collected behind the scenes and ongoing? We at the CyberXR Coalition is going to discuss a unique approach to how that intersection will further determine the roles that will emerge, the roles that are currently there, the roles of big tech, individuals, and just everyday consumerism within the globe in relation to XR and cybersecurity. So our intent today is to help shift the mindset to create awareness of these very issues, of this intersection between XR and our daily lives. More importantly, to draw a baseline via standards and frameworks to provide solutions that are coupled with our strategic collaboration. And when I mean strategic collaboration, it's I want to introduce the panelists that will further explain their position, their role, your role in the intersection between XR and our daily lives. So as looking at the screens here, I'll start with Joel, our first JP. Joel, there you are. Thank you, Joel. Explain what you do in your role in XR. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, April. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and actually super excited to be here. Enjoy talking about this. So my name is Joel Charlotte, as April mentioned. My day job, if you will, I'm the Director of Operations for an organization called the CyberBytes Foundation. We're a nonprofit that focuses on education, innovation, and outreach programs primarily around cybersecurity. And so included in that are emerging technologies like AR and VR. So a great opportunity to be here. My personal background, I studied in grad school and wrote my thesis on using immersive environments to influence people's behaviors. So at the time I was an active duty military member, and so the title was slightly different. It's called Influence Operations. We tend not to speak, I guess, that way outside of the military, but really it's about how we influence people's behaviors or can influence people's behaviors. And so through that research, looked a lot into how to build trust amongst users within virtual environments or immersive environments. And so again, happy and excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Great, and as Joel mentioned, his expertise is in trust. Next, let's go to Alina.
Hey everyone. Thanks for having us, and thanks, April. Looking forward to further be part of this panel and continue what we've discussed last week in our other panel. Yeah, quick intro to myself. I'm Alina Kadlubski. I'm a product designer and WebXR developer by day, and I chair of the public working group of CyberXR.
Thank you, Alina. And Alina will share her expertise in accessibility and privacy as well. I'll jump in before we announce our other final panelists. And so my name is April Boyd-Noronha, the moderator today, and I bring to the table diversity and inclusion perspectives in relation to my role with the XR Safety Initiative as their global D&I advisor, as well as the executive lead of the CyberXR Coalition. Last but not least, the other panel that's joining us today is Claudia.
Thank you, April. Finally, so excited to be on the same panel with you. We made it. And it was like wardrobe change, background change. It was awesome. I felt like a celebrity suddenly. So hello, everybody. It is so great to be with you. Thank you very much for joining at this time. I'm the founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative. And XR Safety Initiative is a 501c3 nonprofit based in California, San Francisco, California. We help build safe, and thanks to April, inclusive XR experiences. And I just now noticed a comment in the chat that this is a new domain. Well, you know what? I wish that it wasn't have to be told that way, that you have to force inclusion. Inclusion, as April says, should be baked into every aspect, every facet of technology. And because it hasn't been the case, then that's why April and I, we met back in 2018 at an award function and took it upon ourselves to form a coalition, to march together, to band together, to not allow inclusion and diversity to be ignored. So I'm just so honored that under her leadership, I'm able to perform, the little aspect of safety. And so thank you so much, April, for doing this. This is such an important work. And I'm just thrilled that we're on the same stage, and thrilled to be with Joel, Alina, just such an exciting time.
So let's get right into the discussion. I want to throw this concept or perspective out, is that when we look at the tech industry and we see its obsession to just blindly continue down the rabbit hole of just creating the next big tech thing, but all the while they're dismissing this bigger picture, that it's just not, that what we're experiencing is just not a tech issue, it's just not a tech thing, but it needs to be, it's a human problem. The humans are using this. The humans are a major factor, if not the factor, with the data sets that are being used and a part of this intersection. So with the same biases that we're seeing that occur in the real world, let's all explain the concept behind the XRSI privacy framework and our individual work of what does this intersection mean? That it is a human problem that we're experiencing as tech moves forward. And any of you can speak to that.
I think there are various issues, and that also ties into the accessibility need as well to be baked in. I mean, our framework that we actually released, and this was also an insight that Kavya just recently shared with me, it's actually one of the first frameworks that's baking accessibility into a privacy framework ever. So this is quite surprising for me. So I think one reasons why we continue to need to talk about this and to also make people aware of this is going back to sort of the groups that we currently have, usually the products where the products that are built in teams that are mainly one kind of population, sort of to say, right? So we are basically missing out a huge opportunity to have from not just only, okay, so here's the product, but in the whole, from the ideation over the production phase, over the testing phase, you need to make sure that every voices are on the table. So, and that it's not just a product that designed from one perspective, but to make sure that, and this goes to either hardware nor software. And I think this is one of the main issues that we have. And unfortunately, still in 2020, we have to talk about those issues. which is really sad and a bit of disappointing.
And Joel and
And
Kavya, add
April,
to that, Joel. Mhm.
yeah, so I think, you talk about it being sort of a human problem, right? And as I look at it, and if you sort of take a step back, the technology has always been sort of about just helping people, but sort of as a byproduct almost, right? Like, so, I mean, I think of like a computer as me being able to get more work done, right? But it's an interaction between just me and the computer, right? Or me and my cell phone. And yes, I can interact with people through text messages or video chats, right? But I think as you get to these immersive technologies, that what we call XR, you now add that human element in because it's all about interacting with other people, right? And so as you're interacting with other people, that brings in a whole new set of issues and areas of concern, or even areas where I don't want to say areas of weakness, but you could almost say like threat vectors, if you will, right? So to use the cybersecurity term. And now, as you talk about, being able to interface with other people, and the fact that it's very immersive, I think to me that's where that's where it all kind of comes together. And so, as I look back on my research and the things that I was talking about, trust was a very important piece of that, because again, you're dealing with the human to human interaction, right? And so how. What I really looked at was how to build trust between people in an immersive environment, but really you could take that further. You could take a step back, take a higher level view of it, and really kind of break it down into 3 areas, right? Like now I've got companies that have access to data about me and who I interact with and how I interact with them on a more intimate level. And I have to be able to trust that they're doing the right thing with that data, right? And then I have to trust the data that's actually in the system, right? Because sometimes we tend to, or I do, I tend to get sort of stuck, if you will, in like VR, but think about AR, right? As we add information to the physical world, that data has to be correct and trustworthy, right? So that I can rely on it to make decisions, whether it's for training or it's for maintenance, et cetera. And then at the end of the day, because it's human to human interaction, I want to be able to trust the other person, right? And figure out the ways to do that. So I think all the work that's being done is very important to be able to advance that kind of a concept.
And I agree. And Kavya, Joel brings us to a great segue with trust and privacy. With a lot of newsworthy headlines that we're recently seeing, let me have you speak to that. As big tech is moving forward and mass production, mass adoption is along that. Talk about the intersection between trust and privacy in the XR realm.
Right. So this is a very interesting, day to be talking about it, because fairly recently, on 26th of October, XRSI's trustworthy immersive platform, Ready Hacker One, we made an announcement that we have established via some researchers that the Quest 2 device was jailbroken. And just earlier, I gave a talk about this whole matter of trust and safety, privacy and identity, and then about safeguarding our extended realities. Why it is such an important thing, this whole jailbreak issues and the aspect of trust and privacy is people are speaking out. If you pick up any of the social media and then just look at what people are talking about, the aspect of jailbreak or trying to, it's almost as if like people feel confined to the walls of some kind of a mandated login, and people feel threatened, they feel like their privacy is threatened within these closed walls. And it all goes back to trust. Why they feel threatened? Because our trust had been broken over and over again. These big tech firms have not been a good guardian of our data. They have violated trust over and over. They have said they are not going to be the arbiter of reality. They have allowed propagation of tremendous damaging misinformation that has caused people to literally die, and they have been responsible for genocide and whatnot. So now we are talking about this whole new level of sophisticated data that is gathered via these technologies. We're talking about biometrically inferred data. So just by spending about 20 minutes in VR, if one can gather, and this is a research that Stanford University put out there last year, is you can gather over 20 million data points just by spending 20 minutes in virtual reality. Just last month, another study that Stanford put out, which was about 5 minutes is all it takes to truly establish a pre-assembled, identity. You have a set of identities of about 500 people, and within a matter of 5 minutes, they were able to accurately establish via viewing a 360-degree experience that that's the person who is viewing it. So imagine, by attributing your gaze just for 5 minutes in a small set of 500 data subjects, they were able to truly establish who you are. Now think about what that means. So I'll share with you just a just an example. So prior to starting XR Safety Initiative, I worked as a head of security at Linden Lab. But before that, I did third-party security for Facebook during US presidential election time in 2016. So when I joined Facebook at that time, I did not have a Facebook login. And I did not have a Facebook account, but because as it turns out, I had to. So I went to my boss and I'm like, hey, do I have to get this account? I had to. And I just did not realize that, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to. And everywhere it says be social, be connected. So I felt real pressure. So I put that account up there, and she said, just put a couple of pictures. But the thing that I did not realize is, during this time, I had actually changed my identity. I used to pray as a Hindu, and I used to have a religion that was quite different. My last name is Perlman. I was Jewish at one point for 5 years, and then I changed my religion to Islam, and I started to wear this headscarf. And I did not tell any of my family member. My family is the Make India Great Again folks. They are very true hardcore Hindus. And one of my uncles, like, what happened is, as soon as I put my pictures up there, I'm not realizing that I had to tighten my privacy policies and what. So my uncle, actually, people that I had never spoken with, that don't want to, they actually started to connect with me. Suddenly, connect people. I don't want to connect with you, but I'm connected with these people, and I'm getting death threats because they suddenly this Facebook AI told the world that Kavya Perlman is hijabi and Muslim. I mean, since then, I have obviously moved on. That uncle, who actually, with his own bare hands, and I'm really ashamed that, that happened, but he's my mom's brother, who killed Muslims with his own bare hands. So when he said, if you come to India, we will kill you, he meant it. So that is a tiny little example of how a default privacy setting and your identity can literally threaten your life. And think about that, the kind of sophisticated data that we are collecting in these environments, and how that informs these other AI-driven algorithms, who we are, how we pray, what we eat, what we ingest as a medicine, what kind of body conditions we may have. So somebody may deny us insurance. Somebody may actually come after us in this turbulent environment that we are about to experience in the United States. I don't know if people would dox me or come after me. So all of these things are just really dangerous. And yet, the human aspect of it is completely ignored. And then these big tech firms have the audacity to demand that we have to expose ourselves and put our identity and put all of our data in their hands. And they have been the reason for genocide and undermining democracies all around. So it goes back to what April is saying, is this human aspect is completely ignored from a trust and safety and privacy perspective, and how damaging it can be, not just for an individual, but for an entire country, that can be damaging.
And even on an inclusive side, and then Joel, I'll come to you to furthermore talk about the trust factor that you have extensively researched over the years. But when I talk about headlines, because I want to be able to have all the guests here connect the dots individually. It's not necessarily always going to be about big tech, but I came across an article in preparation for this panel where students with disabilities you as a student, you input your information into what needs to be done to be awarded admissions or scholarships or what have you. But for a couple of students that were applying for their ACT, learned that they were being marginalized on the fact that they had listed that they had a disability. Unbeknownst to them, they were being excluded from benefits through what they have uploaded or input into the data sets or, their information in relation to that intersection with the ACT. So unbeknownst to them, they were being, because of that notification, were being excluded, not included in a data set or a population where they would be awarded benefits in relation to their ACT. Another data set or another article I came on across in even the medical field. Listen, it's not just big tech. Even in the medical field, where Black patients were not being deemed worthy enough to be in a category for research where they could be in the pool to receive transplants. So medical arena, our community, education community. And even recently we were, the CyberXR Coalition were joined the movement, or it's in initial stages where it's the queer skins were proud of a production that they had won national awards for. But the company Steam had noted or alerted them that they cannot have their arts on their platform. Once again, what is the real meaning behind them determining that this would not be included in this open community? So, it's not just big tech. I mean, I don't know with all the audience that are here, if there are, gurus or geeks in the big tech arena, but the inclusion importance of that, or this human-centered factor, intersects almost every community that you can think about. So when we were talking about this new role of XR with the accessibility, with the intersection of trust and privacy and diverse and inclusive arenas, it impacts all of our lives. So Joel, I want to come back to you. When we talk about trust being baked into the framework within XR, your research has talked about, particulars of how we can look at and help these communities in XR bake that into the frameworks. Tell the audience a little bit more about that, Joel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize, I'm unfamiliar with the articles that you had mentioned, so I don't know that I can speak directly to those. But I mean, in relation to trust, and again, so my research was, as an active duty military guy at the time, it was really about how the military might be able to use the platform to be able to do, operations that they might be interested in. And part of that was being able to develop trust. And if you think about it from the aspect of, if I'd like to get to know you, April, in a virtual environment, whether you represent yourself realistically or how you want other people to see you, there are still ways to figure out who is actually the right person, or who is the physical person behind that, right? So, and then that gets into a whole bunch of psychology and some other things. But to your point about baking trust in, I think it's very similar to baking privacy in or baking security in, right? I mean, it has to be done upfront. It has to be done consciously. And I think the I don't want to say issue, but I think the impediment there is that we are taking people who are inherently biased, right? And then we're allowing them to develop an environment that bias transfers over into, right? Because at the end of the day, XR, whether we think of it as alternate realities or different worlds, they're man-made creations, right? So they are made by people who have those biases and who inherit, whether they know it or not, are transferring or potentially transferring, because I don't want to lump everybody kind of into the same category, right? But there are you are potentially transferring those biases that you may or may not have into the environment that you're building, right? So I think, as you talk about building it in up front, we have to take care to note, we have to, when you test things, right? And slightly unrelated, but very similar is the artificial intelligence conversation, right? So we're building all these algorithms and these models to do things, which maybe not so unrelated, because we will eventually get to, NPCs that are AI enabled. That AI is going to have been developed, but not necessarily tested against a wide range of people, right? Unrelated again, Apple's, or not even just Apple's, anybody, like if you do facial recognition, right? Like there are countless stories out there about how, if you don't use a diverse set of test subjects to test the algorithm, right, then you're only going to get a single set of results at the end of that, right? So I think we just have to be very careful about how we do it. I don't think it's impossible, and I think that there's certainly a way to do it. It's just a matter of being very conscious about how you do it, so that you're not sort of leaving anybody out.
And if I can follow up to that, what Joel is saying is that data set issue is tremendous when it comes to inclusion. So I think it was in February 2019 or something like that, there was a study from a university in Italy where they conducted an experiment where, this particular AI data set was fed all of these literature from 1800s all the way to 2012, all of the literature books. And then basically in an unsupervised learning algorithm, this literature established like this, the core of it, the summary was the 2 columns. And it basically attributed the attributes of women and men. So they wanted to establish like, how does a literature see female and male? And guess what this unsupervised learning AI algorithm established? Women are sexy and beautiful, and men are brave and leaders. And so that's, it goes to show, like, this is just like a very tiny bit of an example. But then I want to talk about how you mitigate that. Then there was another study that University of Virginia and Washington University together conducted, where, they could potentially interject a corpal level constraint, which is a small subset of data, to then mitigate these biases. So initially a data set, when it is fed to the AI, every time it saw a person in the kitchen, almost with 65% biases, it said, oh, that's a woman. So it will see a picture of or read a picture of a man in the kitchen, but it would label it as a woman. And then when they interjected that corpal level constraint, the sample size of data, then it actually mitigated that biases 25%. So out of those 5 different, out of that 5-6 different images, finally this AI was able to accurately establish with less, 25% less biases after this data was introduced, that, oh, there is actually a woman in the kitchen. And I think I explained this better with visuals, but the point is, these biases can be mitigated, but they need an additional steps. And that when you tell the tech bros to do an additional step, and they love to move fast and break things, they don't like it. And this is why CyberXR Coalition exists. We inform people about these things, and we demand inclusion, not from the technology data set perspective, but from also, April was just talking about queer skins. Queer skins is a journey, of a transgender person and her mother's experience that is in, they recorded it in VR. But Steam VR has just last week denied them to be on their platform. Now they have nowhere to go. They are banned. Why? There is no answer. There is nothing, as far as I know, we are in conversation with them, there's nothing bad in there. Why is a transgender VR experience banned from Steam VR platform? For what I understand, Steam is a very inclusive company, but perhaps it's their AI that's doing it, perhaps something else, but they have nowhere to go. Now they have to knock at our door or at anybody's door. They are going public. And that's why CyberXR Coalition is now trying to help them. So even in the real world, as well as in the very deep depth of technology, this aspect of inclusion is so ugly. Like the technology is being built without including all of us, and these biases perpetuate themselves in the real world, like it is happening with queer skins. And thank God that we are banding together and we formed a coalition. I'm going to need this coalition as people potentially come after me, as we are trying to demand right to repair for the XR devices. I have to. And I'm going to need all of you too, because I'm just a minority who's trying to speak the truth. And that is exactly what is at stake here, is these voices that are different, people that are minority. We are being marginalized by technology and by people who develop these technologies, and we need help.
I do want to bring up this point as well, and we had talked about this in a prior panel about the value of your privacy. The title of the panel here is the role, the new role of XR, and we all have a role to play in that. So, Joel, Alina, Kavya, speak to the point of the value of your privacy as we are entering into the end of the year and people are edging to buy this and that, or, regardless of your faith or religion, Christmas is coming up and things of that sort. But as you rush to the stores to buy that next tech product, I'm not going to mention any names or what have you, that inadvertently is directly baked into, monetizing almost the data sets that they can create. What though, as a consumer, as a novice or experienced user within the XR realm, or just in tech in general, the value of your privacy?
And Alina did a talk earlier. I'm going to kick it over to Alina. Maybe follow it back.
I mean, it's a really tough question because, with us entering the internet era, there were so many things that have been unfolded, right? Data collection started, is processed, privacy, misinformation, disinformation. You can't trust what you read. Fact checking became a thing. Before, when you opened a newspaper, you didn't need to think if the media was telling you the truth or not. It was the whole fact checking started to emerge. Also weaponization of information. That's also the era where cybersecurity and privacy laws emerged. But now we are entering this new world where these devices are constantly mapping and tracking everything, but unfortunately up until date, there isn't any regulation out there, right? And also we have devices that due to that lack of not having accessibility baked in from a get-go into the privacy realm, hardware and software in XR should be customizable for all users, right? And especially for those with disabilities or special needs. But currently we have, there are constant factors. And the other thing is, then we have the tech giants, especially now with pre-Christmas time and also Black Friday coming up, we have them selling devices that are less, so you pay less for a device. But on the other hand, they adjusted their privacy regulations, so there is an off balance here. So yes, you pay less for a headset or any technical device, but in which proposition does that stand to the main amount of data that they are collecting and they are storing? And we don't know, in one update of their privacy regulation, they could say, okay, yeah, so we are using your data now, right? So, and I think now is the time where, those headsets are going to be under the Christmas tree in a couple of weeks. So I think what every one of us, without pointing the finger, is we need to ask ourselves, is this really the price that we are willing to pay for a device? Is this really? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, so I was actually gonna kind of, top off your point there. I mean, in my opinion, it's a personal choice, right? So, from my perspective, I know better, but I leave, Google locations on, right? So Google knows where I am. And I do that because I like the convenience of it, right? So, I mean, there are some things that, hey, the data that you collect adds a convenience back to my life. And that is a price, as you put it, that I'm willing to pay, right? But then there's a certain line I won't cross, right? So for example, my kids are nowhere near social media, right? The world has no idea how many kids I have and how old they are and what their names are, because it's none of their business. And I'm not leveraging my kids' sort of identities and life and privacy just so that I can, I don't know, be popular, right? It's not of interest to me. And then there are other lines that I just won't cross. And I think there are other things that people just need to be aware about, right? Or aware of. And I think to that point, the way that individuals need to decide that is to be educated, right? So to understand what data is being collected and to understand how it's being used so that you can make that decision, because you cannot make a decision without information about what it is you're doing, right? So take the time to read terms of service and put aside a lot of time to read terms of service, because it sometimes takes a while to get through the myriad pages of the terms of service. But at least understand generally what it is, right? Or what it is that you're giving up, because the one that we've been talking about related to Oculus is pretty intertwined, right? I mean, it's what you're signing up for, I think, is a lot more than what people understand, right? And so you really need to understand that in order to be able to make that informed decision. But at the end of the day, it's up to each and every person to make that decision for themselves.
And Kavi, I'll let you chime in as well as an industry leader on this particular topic of privacy. Gary Hawkins had asked, is it possible to claim our data as ours and monetize it?
And so I would ask Gary to, Gary, if you're able to talk, would you want to expand on what are your concerns and what do you think, what is the question, if you want to just speak up and we can definitely address it.
Well, technically, I guess it has to sort of coincide with the idea of universal basic income. That we as people, are being used, and other people are getting rich off of us instead of us being able to, claim our data. I don't know how you push it through. How do you change the laws? I don't have any lobbyists. So there's that.
Very good question. And Alina, just remember just a couple of days ago, Alina and I had a great discussion about the universal based income. So I'm like glad that we had that discussion, and now Gary is asking just exactly the same question. And so I'm going to let you talk about that universal based income and how that can be one potential something of an answer. But let me talk about this data monetization. This is a thing that, at least as XRSI, we've kind of stayed away from taking a position on this. And even today, I don't have enough data to actually make a position on behalf of my organization. But I have a personal opinion, which I would like to share. When you go in the direction of monetizing data to be able to, let's say right now, my data is kind of free, right? I check the box and company takes the data. And then I say, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to actually get $10 for this kind of data. Well, guess what? The richest person, those same people, they actually have islands, private islands in Hawaii. They get their privacy. They buy all the properties all around. They never give away their privacy. Well, guess what's going to happen is exactly the same thing. It's going to even further marginalize the people who are in need of money. If I need money and if I can mortgage my privacy and my data, not knowing how that will be weaponized, how that will be used and abused, well, you know what? I really need money for milk and I really need money for all of this. That's the one thing that is really, really problematic, that it is going to create even more dangerous things and precedents when we start to mortgage our privacy to avail experiences, which we already do actually, but we just don't get money out of it. But when you add the element of money, the rich will keep privacy and the rich will decide what will happen to our privacy and our data. And that's why it is so difficult to have this conversation. We've actually literally refrained from this topic because we need so much investigation to make a stand on this. And at the moment, for what we know based on what our researchers are doing, we are not at a place where we could accurately inform the regulators that that's the way to go. And I know there are companies that are using the data and then giving you money for it. And I cannot say whether this is right or wrong. It is just simply a cross section that I am not able to establish without proper information. My hunch is it is bad for humanity. And my hunch is that it is going to put poor people at such dangerous path of sell your data and then you could get milk, you could get some $100 or $500. I don't like the sound of it. And then again, what is the solution, Alina? Universal. to, do you think that's something of a, the book that you talked about?
I personally think that really the solution is, I mean, now with us entering the spatial computing era where the physical and the digital worlds are sort of intertwining and merging, I think it's really important. And this is also something that I'm currently doing. I already shared this with Joel. I'm currently doing specific research, what are currently alternatives out there on the market. And I think moving forward, we should not underestimate the open source community. And this is it's a huge community, and there are already amazing hardware out there that you can build yourself for a dime, and they're in really good quality. So this is one factor. And I also think the whole decentralized open source factor we should not underestimate, because I think everybody who is in this sort of emerging tech ecosystem, they know what's currently at stake, and there are various alienizations and merging and allies being split because we know what's at stake. And I think really as a collective, only as a collective and in a collaboration with people, we can actually gain forces and come together and make a movement. Not me as a single person, but really if we get together and really come together and join forces, be a bigger voice as a collective, only then can we actually make change. And this includes also, we need to, as those headsets and devices are getting cheaper and cheaper and we're entering the mass market, there's a huge need for education out there, because I think most end users, they don't know, they just check the box. But also those letters and pages that we scroll through in order to get to the game are not current anymore. I need to be informed when I'm in the situation, right? Not beforehand. Those lists are not agile. And also moving forward, when I have an AR devices and I cross the street, I need to be informed in the moment that I'm entering an era that maybe says do not augment. I need to be informed in the minute and not maybe years beforehand what could maybe be sort of a possibility where I have to check the box, right? I need to be informed in the moment. And currently, quite frankly, we're scrolling through a PDF page, which is not synced with the technology we are using. That's the other thing where I think we need to adopt and also make the way of how users are being informed more connected and more updated to the technology we are quite frankly using. Otherwise, I don't know what I checked 2 years ago. Do you guys know? I have no clue. I forget.
Yeah.
And here is
In
one
fact,
thing that Javi, do you want to add something?
just that April, on 27th of November, Facebook updated their privacy policy. It was, no, I think it was like 11th of December, November, December. And they updated their privacy policy after buying Beat Saber. Beat Saber is a VR game that allows you to play, the chop boxes. And it basically is for me, but when I look at it, it's a data mine. So they took this data mine, and the last time they updated their privacy policy was when GDPR was introduced. So imagine a company that will only update their privacy policy when an entire government mandates you and tells you we're going to take 4% of your revenue, suddenly conveniently decides to change their privacy policy and update it after buying this thing. So then I look at, oh, what is in this privacy policy? Well, apparently I created a word cloud, and it says may was one of the word that pops up. May, collection of data. And that informs to us that there are these ambiguous sort of languages that we may do this to your data. We may do this to your data. So even that privacy policy, it is a legal tool to do whatever they want in the guise of we may do this, but we're not quite doing this. So it's just, even when you check that box, or even if you remember it at any given point, they can just stand up and say, you know what? We may just kill you or take your data. So it's incredible, the audacity of these privacy policies. And exactly what Alina said, what we need is a more agile, informed, if I step here and I'm putting myself with my privacy at risk in VR, I need to be informed then. How do you inform it? I don't think pop-up is a good way to inform it. I don't know what that is. We need more research. We need to investigate, how do we protect ourselves from these money hungry, data hungry, platforms that are just like, oh, we may just take your data, and that may just cause, genocide. It's crazy.
And if I could jump in and just maybe come back to Gary's kind of question and point. I mean, I think, and like Kavi, I don't know that I even have a personal opinion on this, but I would say I think that, or a fully formed personal opinion, I should say. But I think that we're going to come back to this question more than once. And I don't think I think the allure is there, right? So you see the corporate companies making money off you. I'm not entirely sure that same data is valuable when it's owned by me and auctioned off or sold off, right? So I think there's still a lot to go. I will say one area I think it might be an interesting area is in the medical field, right? So I wear a smartwatch, right? Or as I'm collecting data from AR glasses, or I'm wearing heart monitors, or I'm wearing, that kind of data could be very useful to my doctor. But then again, I don't know, or the health or health insurance companies, right? But I don't know, is it valuable to them, right? Like, is that enough data that's going to be valuable enough to them to pay me for it? And that's why I think we're going to come back to this, right? Like this issue, even if somebody came out today and said, yeah, it's a great thing, next week, that opinion could very easily change, just because it's such a dynamic thing. And it's essentially a new market, right? I mean, we would be flipping the script and saying, okay, it's my data, who wants it? And initially right now, I don't think that there's a market, but I could be wrong.
Yes, Virginia, did you have a
Yes,
question?
I just wanted to jump on about healthcare insurance. I think it's the worst problem arriving now, because the data about health, I think we have taken this example in the past about health insurance who could propose less lower cost insurance to people who are connected all the time and who are making the good thing to stay in good health. If you are not doing the good thing to stay in good health, your insurance will level up, you see. And I think it is one of the biggest problem arriving, because that means that people won't be the owner of their data anymore, but they won't be the owner of their body anymore, you see.
Right.
So this is one of the most dangerous point arriving, and it is just at our door now, you see.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
agree.
emerging. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let me, as we come to the end of the hour, yes, just say this. So we know that it's going to be a collective effort, just like any other movement, just like any other issue or emerging trend. And that is specifically why Kavya had the vision to create the XR Safety Initiative, and then to bring me in to be the lead of the CyberXR Coalition to make sure that these foundational principles are baked in. When I talk about the foundational principles, please know, and you can go to both of the websites, the xrsi.org or cyberxr.org, to see the frameworks that we have put out there. Alina kind of talked about the open source. It is available to all. Both are all of the frameworks, and most recently the privacy framework that the XRSI has released. We are encouraging the community, XR and even outside of, to join us, one, to help make those principles that we outlined in the privacy framework more adoptable for the community, for the industry. Even more so with the CyberXR Coalition, we have opened up the coalition for members to join us to help take this forward as well. So we are encouraging, asking those that are here today and even your peers to join us to further increase activity, the engagement, and on the importance of what this new role in XR would, should, could look like. And so, Mohammed, do we have a couple of moments for closing points for each of our panelists? Or
yes, I have, but I won't use it now. It's my joker. And now, Aliris is trying to say something, so I wanted to say, and then we will come to someone. Except, I will tell you. Aliris, you have a question, maybe?
Yes,
For
I
sure.
do. Thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, this is a great panel. Thank you for having it and listening to it. Thank you for my dose of existential angst for today, my overdose in that. I wanted to ask, and this kind of goes back to trust and also our role, April, as you are encouraging us to be a part of this, is when I look at all the privacy issues and, you know, who has the right to use my data. I call it, you know, we need to educate people in data citizenry. Like we had financial education, we now need data education to make people understand. But my question is just a really broad one, and that is whose right is right when we're talking about the individual and the organizations. You know, if the organization, or say the corporate organization, is telling us this is the way to do things, this is how it should be done, my biases are what is right, because I'm trying to be objective, even though they don't recognize their own biases in that objectiveness, because the technology isn't objective, as we all know. So my question is, you know, how do we correct for individual rights and then the individual's right to follow a certain organization or the way that things are being done, and then maintain the
she brings up a great question. Who's right is
So,
right. And which one of the panelists wants to tackle that? Are we all here?
Who is talking? I don't see.
That was April. April was talking. So I can just jump in here about I will briefly say, if this was 1990, If this was even 1800, we may not have known who is right, but thank God it is 2020. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we've had 2016. And we have had 2011 in Egypt. The same social media platform brought down a dictatorship. Then we had Cambridge Analytica. Then we have had precedents. This is not a new thing. So I think we should base our information or our assessment, our decisions on what has happened in the past. And we have a right to do so. And when I say digital rights are human rights, so we should look at organizations that actually do care for human rights and not just put it on a billboard and say, future is private. Well, actions speak louder than words.
Wow,